message come up, and we will put this in our YouTube channel where you can also find previous webinars that we've had. I want to tell you just a little bit about the Illinois Recycling Foundation, who's hosting today's webinar. I'm the president, Marta Keene, and we have an incredible board. They represent all different types of recycling and environmental interests, from textile recycling and paint recycling to traditional curbside recycling. And so we're really excited, as well as, I should mention composting, outreach to colleges and universities. So we really are excited to have such a dynamic board and be able to offer a well-rounded informational source to everyone who participates with us. We do ask you to consider becoming a member. The purpose of the Illinois Recycling Foundation is we are a 501c3 educational organization. We have been around since 1980, dedicated to waste reduction, reuse, recycling, and supporting markets for recycled content materials. We recognize the need for reuse, recycling, and composting infrastructure throughout the state of Illinois, and we like to showcase the jobs and the economic impact that these efforts create. Members come together to seek solutions to challenges that impact our mission. We express our concerns to state agencies and to political leadership when necessary. We welcome members of industry, government, educational institutions, and nonprofits that share our goals to become the Illinois Recycling Foundation and Association members. A few reasons to join our organization, besides the fact that we've been around for over 40 years as the collective voice for recycling in Illinois, is all of our members receive our monthly newsletter, which usually is packed with information. Our members attend webinars free of charge.
They will get that 95 garbage and 65 recycling.
Muting someone
so they
here,
have no choice for
recycling. We can post job postings at no additional fee, and additional employees of an organization that's a member attend our webinars for free. There's discounted fees for our in-person events, and we also have a membership directory on our website where many people come to find services. In fact, it's our second most viewed page. Our newsletter always features at least one member, sometimes multiple, and we also highlight member activities in our social media. Full members are also members of the National Recycling Coalition. So it's very reasonable. I have the fees on the bottom. You can see them on our website as well. To join us, we try to make it affordable for everyone. And if you do have more funds available to you, we would ask you to consider stepping up, maybe becoming a benefactor of our organization. We just held our CIRA workshop for residential electronics with the EPA. Of course, today is our plastic film webinar, and then we do expect to have a webinar in March. The date has not been set yet, on Illinois legislation that's going to be impacting recycling. There's a number of bills that have been put out, so we'll be hopefully hearing a little bit about those, followed by our Recycling Professionals Forum in Earth Month, and then hopefully composting around the state. Please mark your calendars for June.
On my Zoom call.
We're going to be having a conference in the Bloomington Normal area, and we're very excited about.
Marta, you just went on mute for some reason.
Yeah, did mute all maybe?
Oh, caught me. There we go. Thank you for letting me know. So today's Illinois Recycling Foundation's Plastic Film Recycling Fact or Fiction is sponsored by the Flexible Packaging Association. Flexible Packaging Association is the voice of the U.S. manufacturers of flexible packaging and their suppliers. The association's mission is connecting, advancing, and leading the flexible packaging industry. Flexible packaging represents over $39 billion in annual sales in the United States and is the second largest and one of the fastest growing segments of the packaging industry. Flexible packaging is produced from paper, plastic, film, aluminum foil, or any combination of those materials, and includes bags, pouches, labels, liners, wraps, roll stock, and other flexible products. I'm going to now hand the reins of this to Mike Novak, who will be sharing the agenda and introducing each of our speakers. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Marta, and welcome to everyone. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you to our speakers. Thank you to the Flexible Packaging Association for sponsoring this. We appreciate all of you and glad you're here. And we're hoping to have a lively conversation. And as Marta mentioned before, please put your comments in the chat function and we will get to that. We have 5 speakers, so we're going to be whipping through this, and we will not be able to do questions as we go through, but hold them to the end. And like we said, put them in the chat room and we will get to them when we're finished with the presentation. Also, if you just showed up, please pay attention to your mute button because that happens sometimes. The new attendees intrude on the presentation, and we appreciate your cooperation with that. Okay, let's start with Jordan Parker from the Triveni Institute. She founded Bring Your Bag Chicago, a grassroots campaign to encourage a shift from single-use to reusable bags. After 5 years of work, the Chicago checkout bag tax was passed and went into effect in 2017. That same year, she founded the Triveni Institute, a nonprofit. And I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, Jordan. You can correct me if I have that pronounced wrong. A nonprofit that creates paying jobs for grassroots environmental advocates doing work in one or more of the following areas: plastic pollution and waste, environmental justice, and storytelling and the arts. She is an active member of the Coalition for Plastic Reduction, where she is currently working on a statewide EPR, or extended producer responsibility legislation. We have talked about that on our webinars in the past. And Jordan is also serving as executive director for Trashin' Revolution, Chicago's first annual trash fashion show. And I think we're going to see a couple of photos from that to raise awareness of plastic pollution. An avid cyclist, writer, and chess player, Jordan lives in Chicago with her 2 dogs. Jordan, take it away.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much, Mike. It's a privilege to be here today to discuss such an important topic. And I'd like to thank the Illinois Recycling Foundation and the Flexible Packaging Association for making this possible. I'd also like to thank the other panelists for joining me today in what I think will be a great discussion. So here on my cover slide, you'll see an art installation I designed with some Northwestern students almost a decade ago in 2013. It was created from 2,568 plastic bags, the amount that were used every minute in Chicago pre-bag tax. That was based on the consumption of 500 bags per person annually. Now, we don't have any data in Chicago specifically on pre-tax usage, so these numbers were extrapolated from national stats. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is my gloomiest slide. I'm going to take us all to a dark place for just a moment. But the good news is this webinar is only going to get better from here, so bear with me. Plastic bags are just one part of a 4-fold existential issue. Plastic production and pollution is fueling climate change. As the world transitions to clean energy, the fossil fuel and chemical industries have pivoted to plastics as their main profit center for the future. Ethane crackers and petrochemical plants are taking the place of decommissioned coal plants. And something you will hear more and more is plastic is the new coal. According to the EPA, only 10% of all plastic film is recycled. Most plastics can be recycled into their original form with infusion of virgin plastic only 1 or 2 times before they need to be downcycled into lumber, products, or clothing. Because of the myriad difficulties with recycling plastic film and flexible plastics, the plastics industry has been redefining recycling in recent years to include advanced recycling technologies like chemical recycling, gasification, pyrolysis, solvolysis, thermal desorption, waste to energy, waste to fuel, and other chemical or molecular conversion processes. In other words, because plastics, particularly plastic film and flexible plastics, cannot be recycled in the traditional sense, the plastics industry is finding new ways to get rid of it and calling that recycling. But there are pollutants released all along the way, from extraction to production to disposal, whether that is in petrochemical plants, litter, landfills, or factories that perform these advanced recycling technologies. And the communities living in sacrifice zones next to this industry are most often BIPOC and low income, which makes this an environmental justice issue. The harm caused to humans and animals living near this industry can be defined as chronic chemical and environmental violence. And of course, we are at risk for acute environmental disasters like the train derailment that just happened in East Palestine, Ohio. The train was carrying several hazardous chemicals used to create plastics, such as vinyl chloride, a brain, lung, blood, and liver carcinogen. Now, at this point, we are all probably familiar with the viral video of the sea turtle suffering with the plastic straw lodged in its nose, or the albatross carcasses decaying around perfectly intact clumps of plastic where their bellies used to be. But what we aren't talking about is that plastic is a human health crisis as well. Contrary to the industry narrative, plastic is not inert. It's chemically active and is exposing us to PFAS, thousands of chemical toxins, and microplastics. The CDC found that 97% of Americans have PFAS in their blood, and these substances continue to be unregulated. Okay, I know that was a little rough. Thank you for getting through that with me. Next slide, please. So clearly, plastics are an issue. So what's the alternative? I think a useful way to answer that question is to reframe how we look at the products and packaging we interact with every day. So essential plastics are the plastics that will save your life if you end up in the ER or are getting chemotherapy after a cancer diagnosis. Also, some food packaging is essential. I would also probably go ahead and put dog poop bags in this category. I'm sure that there are plenty of dog lovers here today like myself, and I just have to say that there is no better substance than plastic film for picking up dog waste. It's just a fact. So I do have a partial solution to the dog poop quandary I can discuss in the Q&A if it comes up. So non-essential plastics are basically everything else: single-use bags, bottled water, coffee cups, lids, utensils, plastic tampon applicators, red Solo cups, single servings, much of the packaging we see nowadays, and so on. The questions we need to be asking are, 1, should certain products even exist? And 2, is there an alternative to this plastic? 4th slide, please. Thanks. In the discussion of this plastics problem, a few false dichotomies repeatedly come up. The first is, can we recycle our way out of this plastic problem? Or do we need to reduce the amount of plastic being created in the first place? So arguments we hear for flexible plastics and film are that they are lighter, use less plastic than hard plastic packaging, and they prevent food waste. I would argue that only after we exhaust the possibility of reduction and introduce reuse and refill systems should we see flexible plastics as a viable solution. Reduction of plastics can coexist with robust recycling systems for materials that are actually recyclable, like glass, metal, and paper. The next dichotomy I hear often is, Who is to blame for this problem? Individuals blame industry for producing this stuff in the first place, and industry blames individuals for littering. It's not either or, it's both and. We need to hold producers responsible, and we as consumers need to make different choices. We need both top-down and bottom-up solutions. EPR is a way to hold producers responsible for the end of life of products and packaging that they put out into the world. But I would caution that the EPR that the plastics industry supports is, quote, well-crafted EPR that doesn't contain much, if any, source reduction. They instead focus on the myth that we can recycle our way out of the plastic problem because that's better for profits. Bottom-up solutions are things like plastic taxes, fees, and bans designed to encourage individual behavioral change at scale. The photo on the right is our model Brie, by the way. We are producing, like Mike said, a trash and show called Trash and Revolution in May, and we just did this photo shoot a few weeks ago. It was really fun. Next slide, please. So one of those such policies was the Chicago checkout bag tax passed in 2016. So if you take a look at this most recent FOIA, you'll see that it covers the very beginning of the implementation of this tax, which was exactly 6 years ago this month in February 2017. It goes all the way to the end of December 2022. So in 5 years, this 7-cent checkout bag tax generated $48 million, over $48 million. That is the revenue that went to the city. That's the 5 cents out of the 7 that went to the city. So this actually generated more revenue because the retailers got to keep 2 cents out of that 7 cents. So how many bags does this represent that people paid for through this tax? It's almost 1 billion bags. And to put that in perspective, it's 309 single-use bags being used every minute for the last 5 years and 11 months. That's insane. However, compared to a national average of 300 to 400 bags per person used annually, in Chicago, we're at 59, which is below the national average. So the plus side here is that we have data now. We have 6 years of data. Now we can improve on this policy to try to capture more people who are using reusable bags. And we can talk more about where we go from here in the Q&A.
And you have about a minute here to wrap up.
Okay, great. This is my final slide coming up. Finally, the third false dichotomy I hear often is that producing and consuming less hurts profits and the quest for infinite economic growth. But I'm pretty sure that a planet that is no longer habitable is also going to be bad for profits. So I think that we need to shift our attention to the health of the only planet we have that supports life. And that's not hyperbole or alarmism. That's just logic. Humans have not historically been adept at thinking long-term, especially beyond our individual lifespans, and we are addicted to short-term profits and convenience. We need to evolve beyond this as a species in order to not just survive, but to survive well. One of the things that makes America great is our focus on the individual, on freedom, and our democracy. But with these things comes responsibility, the responsibility to think about all of the other life on the planet and our place within the biome, not separate from it and above it. Our planet is 4.3 billion years old, and in just the past 200 years or so, which is a tiny, tiny sliver of time, since the dawn of the Industrial Revolution, humans have acquired the abilities and tools to transform our atmosphere, land, waterways, and oceans. We are going in the wrong direction. We need to envision a world without plastic pollution. What does a world without so much plastic look like? We need to be willing to challenge the status quo to create that. And with that, I will pass it on to the next speaker. Thank you so much, and I look forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Jordan. Appreciate it. We move on to John Bernardo. He works on waste reduction and circularity for the Albertsons companies. If you live around Chicago, you're familiar with Jewel Osco, which is part of the Albertsons family. John directs the company-wide efforts to promote food donations, divert food waste destined for landfill, and advocates for sustainable and circular packaging used to deliver product to stores and distribution centers. John has worked to promote sustainability and resource conservation for 25 years in retail, medical, utility, and small business settings. He is an avid mountain biker, archery enthusiast, and once got to play the Sunday puzzle with Will Shorts. All right, John.
Thank you, and thank you for the opportunity to be here. So let me tell you about film plastics recycling that occurs at your local Jewel Osco store. Next, please. So you will see containers like this in a typical store. They may have a different look to them, but basically we're providing a space for customers to bring their film plastic back to the store. That can be plastic bags, paper towel and toilet paper overwrap, newspaper sleeves, etc. We collect those in a bag that's also recyclable inside that container. And then the picture on the right shows what happens when we empty that full container and tie off the top. Next. We then take that plastic and with other materials that we're backhauling to our distribution center located in Melrose Park, we either put the plastic bags in what is called a watermelon bin or a Gaylord, and you can see that on the top left. And then it's also on the top of the pallets on that forklift. So we backhaul from stores to the distribution center. Next, please. Then at the distribution center, we bale it together so that it is easier to maneuver. It takes up less space, it's more compact. We bale it, and then next slide, we ship that off in a truck to a company called Trex, and Trex has 2 warehouses in the US where they collect all of these bales. They go through and look for contaminants. And then your next slide, you'll see where they're doing a sorting line. And this plastic is now a feedstock for a new product. So this is recycling, and in a sense, it's a reuse. It's just not the same use as the original use. Next slide. And the Trex company uses the plastic feedstock with wood chips and other proprietary materials to make decking, benches, and other outdoor products like railings. So you may have seen Trex at a local hardware store or Home Depot or Lowe's. It's that outdoor decking that doesn't splinter. It holds up to weather. Doesn't normally need to be painted or stained because it doesn't break down. So that's the story at Jewel. That's what we do with the plastic bags that you bring back to us. We've been doing that for decades. And Albertsons is in 34 states and the District of Columbia. And we've been doing this at our banners for, as I said, many, many years. Thank you.
Wow, you're you've got extra time left there, John. And we do have plenty of time. We're doing very well here. I would suggest if anybody wants to pop in a question really quickly, I know we're going to do these at the end. Is there anyone who has a question for John about this? Okay, we've got a question here. Claire, do the stores run into problems with contamination? people throwing trash bottles, diapers, and no-nos in there?
Yes, we encounter that all the time. People are busy, they get preoccupied at a grocery store, and maybe in one hand they have their plastic bags, and in the other they have the remnants of the coffee they just brought into the store from stopping at a coffee shop, and they choose the wrong container, it becomes a contaminant. So we do, on a very slight level, because we just don't have the time or the labor, when we are bagging up that bin full of plastic bags, we do look for anything that would be a major contaminant, because if we bail a contaminated bag with other bags, it can possibly contaminate the entire load, and then everything needs to go to landfill, which is what we're trying to avoid.
All right, Adina has her hand up. Yes, Adina.
Nope, sorry, I took it down. It was the same question.
Oh, okay. Well, I have a question, and I don't mean to be naive, and this might be addressed later, but what about a mailing envelope like this, the bubble wrap? It's all completely plastic. Is that the kind of film plastic that can be used?
Yes, according to the Trex company, which is the company we divert and transport this material to, they take number 2 and 4 plastics, and if it's flexible, as they say, if you can bend it and it doesn't crinkle or crack like a takeout container would, then it's something that they can use. So yes, the bubble wrap is something that they can also take. So we can have people put bubble wrap in this collection bin. We cannot take styrofoam peanuts, so it's not all packaging, but bubble wrap, yes.
So bubble wrap that is contained in this envelope, but bubble wrap separate as well.
Well, the bubble wrap in the envelope would be, the paper of the envelope would be a contaminant. Now, Trex, I see a question coming in about what about stickers or labels? Yes, we understand that, especially when you're collecting from the general public, you're not going to have completely clean material. Trex can handle a certain percentage of contaminants, and they let us know if they get a particularly contaminated load from one of our DCs. But for the most part, they can take material that has some contamination to it. They clean that out in that sorting line that I showed in one of the slides.
Okay, well, I'll tell you what, since our Trex speaker is next, let's move on to Stephanie Hicks. And I see there are a bunch of questions coming in that are going to be directed at you and probably Stephanie as well. And we'll get to those at the end. Stephanie Hicks is from Trex and is the materials sourcing manager for a Trex company in Winchester, Virginia. She has represented Trex company's recycling education and outreach for more than 10 years with the goal of educating the public on correct plastic bag and film recycling efforts. Stephanie will share information on the Trex plastic film recycling efforts, including new Trex store drop-off program and the Next Trex grassroots movement. I'm sorry, I meant to say Next Trex and the Next Trex grassroots movement initiative. Stephanie?
Well, thank you very much. Yeah, I think having Albertsons, Jewel Osco go before me was a great idea. You can go ahead to the next slide. So just to give a little bit of background, Trex has been around for about 30 years. We make wood alternative decking or composite decking, whichever you'd like to call it. We have 2 plants, one in Virginia, one in Nevada. The Virginia plant is our larger and our flagship facility. We have announced a 3rd site in Arkansas that's set to open probably in 2026 or 2027. And we employ about 1,700 full-time employees. Our decking is sold not only in the US, but also internationally in 43 countries. And we are the largest domestic recycler of polyethylene film. Next slide. So Trex basically has 2 main components that make up 95% of the decking board. We purchase waste wood that comes from hardwood flooring manufacturers and cabinet manufacturers. So it's their byproduct of their manufacturing process. And then we purchase polyethylene film in the form of grocery bags or pallet wrap. Those would be the main components, but of course, all of the items that can go into store drop off as well. So those are the two main commercial applications that we purchase our film from. We basically take those two items and that's what creates our decking board. Next slide. This slide kind of shows, it demonstrates best how I can explain to you how our process works, because we don't have actually any video of our process. But basically we have waste that comes in from the two streams that I've already discussed. We take those two items, shred the plastic, pulverize the wood, mix them together, heat them up, extrude them through a die like you would if you were playing with Play-Doh. Then the board is cooled and it becomes, excuse me, it becomes a decking board. Next slide. So we talk a lot about recycling, but the previous presenter kind of hit on this. You could call what we do with plastic bags reuse, you could call it upcycling, because we are taking a relatively inexpensive plastic bag and turning it into a pretty expensive decking board. So that I think qualifies for upcycling. In 2021, we recycled 400 million pounds of plastic film. We coordinate over 2,500 school and community programs every year. And we have about 32,000 retail collection points throughout the US and Canada. That is primarily our grocery and retail partners. Next slide. So this slide here, if you want to just hang out here for a minute, I think we'll answer a lot of questions. This is what we have on our website, and it's on also if you ever see a Trex recycling bin, this would be the information that you would see on there as well. All of these items kind of have something in common. They are all polyethylene, and they all had dry goods in them. So the contamination is very low. Cereal box liners are acceptable as well. All of these films would be a number 2, a number 4. Most of them, if you try to stretch them, they will stretch with your thumb. And that's one of the indicators that something is a polyethylene film. The other thing that you'll notice would be that they all are a soft film. They're not a crinkly film. They're not like a cellophane. They're not when you try to stretch them, they're not going to rip, or they'll have some resistance to them. So all of these items definitely can go in your store drop-off bins. And I think our grocery stores that are partners with us would be happy to accept them. Next slide. This represents our two streams. Actually, the post-consumer kind of feeds into the post-commercial, but basically what you're looking at with our post-commercial would be distribution, manufacturing operations, warehouse operations that generate a large amount of pallet wrap or bubble film, or what we like to call it's like a thin furniture foam is what I would call it. Those items then can be baled and then sold to Trex. Through our consumer program, these slides, the stuff that we just saw on the other slide, would be the things that could go into your grocery store bin. Next slide. This, as the gentleman from Albertsons already demonstrated better than I can, I think, basically shows how things flow from the Trex system. So you have your collection of plastic bags. You're going to take them back to the grocery store. The grocery store is going to take them back to the receiving area. It's going to go to their distribution center. It's going to be baled. And when the distribution center generates a full tractor trailer load of plastic film, then it will be purchased and sent to Trex. It takes about 41,000 pound bales to make up a full tractor trailer load. Next slide. This is a new option for us. the grassroots movement. We just started it last year, but it's trying to, the goal with this is to start recycling outlets for consumers that are not specific to grocery store drop off. Next slide. This could be any variety of things. This could be a municipality. This could be a small business. This could be a brewery. This could be a school system. Anybody who has an interest in operating as basically the distribution center on a smaller scale for a grocery store. So it's a simple centralized drop-off location for consumers. We purchase the film. Once it's baled, we help with whatever obstacles are preventing the organization from becoming a collection point. If they need a baler, we can help with that. If they need a shed to house where the consumers can drop off, we can help with that. If they need recycling containers, we help with that. If they need outside storage because they don't have enough warehouse space, we can help with that. So all of these things, we work really hard with anyone who's interested to try to figure out other options for recycling. We've had quite a few takers. We have about 22 sites right now throughout the United States, and it's growing every day. Next slide. We have our school and community programs. We've hosted those since about 2006, and we have more than 2,000 to 2,500 school and community programs. The majority of those are community programs. Annually, we're running around 500 to 700 schools that are participating. For these programs, we provide promotional support through recycling bins, magnets, and posters. Next slide. So for the school program, the schools are competing against other schools in a similar region and of similar size to recycle the most plastic film. We ask for there to be a basically quote unquote school champion who's gonna help educate the school. They're gonna help organize the folks that are weighing and reporting the plastic bags, and of course delivering it to our grocery store partners. And what Trex provides, we provide each school with 3 recycling bins, a poster, and magnets for each student. And what you see on the right-hand side of the screen there is an example of the magnet and the posters that goes to the school. The winning schools receive a bench from Trex. All other participants, all other school participants receive some sort of award that we make out of Trex. I believe this year we're going to do a coat rack, a small coat rack. Next slide. I pulled together what we have going on right now in Illinois. So we have about 34 schools in the state of Illinois that are participating. And just since the program started November 15th, they have collected almost 7,000 pounds of film, with Stillman Valley High being the leader in this. The program does end on Earth Day, and awards are announced by then. Next slide. Our community program right now is set up so that this would be for houses of worship, civic organizations, Lions clubs, libraries, Parks and Rec, you name it. We've probably run across an organization that is participating in this. My apologies. So the goal is the organization picks a 6-month period to participate in. We provide them with the bins and the posters, and then they're working towards a goal of recycling a minimum of 500 pounds in a 6-month period. And then there is an example of the bench that they will receive. Next slide. This is hard to see, I know, but I wanted to show it just so that you could see that these are the community organizations that are participating in Illinois. And just this year alone, they've recycled over 38,000 pounds of plastic, which is very impressive. Next slide. This just directs you to our website. We have a whole section of our website that is dedicated to our Next Trex outreach. We have videos on there that show all kinds of good things. We have what you can recycle, what you can't recycle, common questions. So it's a it's a plethora of information there for anyone who's interested in what can be recycled by Trex to become a decking board. Next slide. And that's it for me. My contact information is there. Feel free to reach out.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Stephanie. Let's move on to Mark Stumpf from the Alliance to End Plastic Waste. Mark is on a loan to the Alliance to End Plastic Waste from ExxonMobil. In his current role, he leads the development and implementation of AEPW-funded projects across the Americas. Previously, Mark was Vice President, Chemicals and Refining for ExxonMobil's affiliate in Saudi Arabia. And prior to that, Manager Chemicals for Imperial Oil, located in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, where he was responsible for the chemical business in Canada. He was also the chair of the board of the Chemistry Industry Association of Canada in 2015. Mark joined Imperial Oil in 1993 and has held a variety of positions with Imperial Oil and ExxonMobil in Toronto, Houston, and Calgary, including sales, supply, plant operations, and business leadership, including manager, investor relations, and manager, safety, health, and environment for Imperial Oil. Mark is the major donor cabinet of the United Way of Calgary, is on the major donor cabinet of the United Way of Calgary and area, and was the co-chair of the Leadership Giving Cabinet in 2014. Mark was born and raised in Ontario, Canada. He holds a Bachelor of Applied Science degree in Chemical Engineering from the University of Waterloo and a Master of Business Administration degree from York University in Toronto. He's married with a son and a daughter and currently lives in Calgary, Alberta. In his free time, Mark enjoys playing and watching sports, especially baseball, hockey, golf, and squash. And all I want to know is, where do you get to watch squash on television?
Thank you, Mike. Yeah, I haven't seen it lately, last couple of years, but when maybe it was a more of a Asia thing when I was living in Saudi Arabia. You could find it on TV over there. But anyways, thank you very much for the time today to come and talk to you about what the Alliance is doing. I want to talk a bit about our mission and what we're trying to do to really address circularity in films and flexibles, particularly in the United States and in the Chicago area. Next slide. Yes, so the Alliance was formed in 2019. It's still a young organization by a number of multinational companies to try and help solve the plastic waste dilemma. We're now up to just about 80 members. As I said, it's a global organization headquartered in Singapore, and we are a US registered charity under the 501c3 part of that. We do want to position ourselves or talk about ourselves as a do tank and not just a think tank. So what we primarily do is to fund and help de-risk initiatives, businesses, projects around the world that are trying to address the plastic waste issue. We target ideas and these initiatives that are at significant scale, so things that will make an impact in the thousands of tons. And where in much of the world, it's about preventing leakage of plastic to the environment, helping start up proper waste management facilities and practices, and some basic recycling. We're also focused on trying to increase the circularity of plastics, whether that's recycling, reduce, or reuse, to try and have the impact on the environment through reuse of plastics, and I'll say reduction of use of fossil fuels for plastic production. Mentioned we have many members from across the plastic value chain. We have a number of the plastic resin producers are part of the organization. We have brand and retail, and a couple you'll recognize in particular Pepsi and Procter & Gamble are what we call members of the Alliance. We also have a number of the plastic converters, such as Amcor and John, who's speaking after me. These are the companies that take the plastic resin and make the packaging that then the brands will use for their products. And this is a particularly significant business in the Midwest area of the United States. And we also have some of the waste management companies as part of membership. So the way we go about trying to have impact, as I mentioned, is the funding of individual, what we say here is projects or ideas that are trying to address, either the how to collect more plastic waste and in particular films and flexibles, how we can sort that plastic waste into subsections of plastic that are most easily brought back into a circular value chain, and also how we take that plastic and convert it back to a usable product. Then we think about those projects and bringing them together into solution models. So in many parts of the world, it is about basic, capacity building for collection or sortation, or around accelerating, as we're talking today, accelerating film recycling. And we're looking for models that are, replicable in either certain geographies or around the world, that we can help demonstrate that first instance and help de-risk that first instance that's of an at-scale idea, and then anticipate and help catalyze that investment or catalyze that idea to replicate it in many areas. And then thirdly, what we try and do is bring together these solution models to create a holistic solution. And I'll talk more about what we're doing in the United States and Chicago in this area, what we call our flagship programs, where we see a need, see an opportunity, and want to help create the solutions to address that problem. And as I mentioned, we do this by providing loans primarily to for-profit businesses or grants to not-for-profit businesses and to do that de-risking to catalyze additional investments. So we may invest 20, 25, 30% in a particular opportunity to help de-risk it in the sense that then others will come in and provide funding as well, knowing that the Alliance is contributing to this and helping to create a better investment opportunity for standard investment. So a couple of things I want to talk about on this page, just briefly for some type of scale comment. To date, our members have committed $1.2 billion, and so far, with a portion of that money so far, we funded over 50 projects around the world, and you can see how that's spread out geographically. Again, with a main focus on preventing leakage of plastic to the environment. And so the developing world is where we put a lot of our funding into projects and ideas in that part of the world. But as I mentioned, we're also trying to help drive that more circular solution for plastic back to plastic. And I do want to comment on the right-hand side of the page here with a typical waste hierarchy. And whatever we can do to help reduce the amount of plastic that is used in something is certainly a good thing. We use plastic because of the functionality it brings, whether it's protecting food from spoilage, whether it's reducing energy use through lightweighting of cars, or replacing, through replacement of glass and metal, even in packaging, that very much lightweights things, and all the transportation associated uses less energy and has a positive impact on CO2 emissions, for instance. And so, but wherever that functionality can be achieved with using less plastic is certainly something that always at the top of the waste hierarchy. Reuse is certainly another idea that is definitely we support in terms of trying to reduce plastic use. And the idea is there that around what we talked about at the beginning here around shopping bags. And to me it's much about how do we change people's behavior, and it takes a long time. And you can see that in how many plastic bags are still used in Chicago, even if it does cost money. It does provide functionality. There are alternatives out there. There are no perfect alternatives. But driving that behavior of reuse, there are projects around the world that we are supporting that are working on reuse models for personal care or cleaning products. A lot of plastic and plastic film gets used in food contact, and that is a bigger challenge to try and address, given the safety concerns, obviously, with contamination in food and beverage, and ensuring reuse models consider that. So that's a bigger challenge. And so we come to recycling, where for the foreseeable future is where we can have the biggest impact on reducing plastic waste and being more circular with our use of plastic. And there are two main ways of thinking about this that some of the speakers have touched on already. And that's around mechanical recycling, where you grind up the plastic and reform new packaging with it. And that's, from a recycling perspective, always going to be the most effective way of bringing that plastic back into the economy, or back into use. But again, application, there are how they enforce this for food safety purposes, the reuse of film. And that's where, again, for the foreseeable future, there is an opportunity with advanced or chemical recycling that we can take film that's been used for food, and how do we bring it back into film to reuse for use in food packaging. And advanced and chemical recycling is certainly one way we can do that today, again, as the alternative to having no recycled content in food packaging. Last thing I wanted to touch on this page is just one example of the projects we're working on in North America, and specifically in the Midwest. And that's an investment we made with a company called MyPlast that's constructing a film recycling facility in the Minneapolis area. This was a South African company that has been doing this business in South Africa for a while, and coming to the US, they couldn't readily access all the investment they need to build this facility. So we provided them a loan, and they're in the midst of, as I said, construction, and will eventually recycle about 50,000 tons a year of plastic film back into the circular economy in this facility, and have plans to further expand both regionally and globally their business. So an example of how we help that first instance of something significant get off the ground, and then anticipate it'll continue to replicate and catalyze other investments as they expand. Last page I want to touch on is what we're specifically doing with some US, with 3 cities in the United States, including the city of Chicago and the greater Chicago area, recognizing that recycling of film and flexibles from households is the biggest challenge we have in North America today around plastic reuse and plastic recycling. Roughly 50% of the plastic used in the household is film and flexibles, and very little of it today gets recycled. So we're taking on this challenge, working with stakeholders in these 3 cities about how can we create the system that does this? How can we collect it? How can we then sort it into its various fractions so that it can be put back into reuse? And then working with companies to actually take that plastic and make new packaging out of it. With Trex and what they've been doing for the last couple of decades of reusing material into plastic lumber and related applications is one great way we can recycle and reuse plastic. We're trying to take it to the next level and do a film to film recycling from household film waste, recognizing that we need a system that is, call it, user friendly and convenient. Store take back is certainly one way people can put their plastic back into the economy. We're looking to leverage the existing recycling system, which in the United States is your typical put all your recyclables in one bin concept, and to include film into that what we call single stream or single cart system, as a way to get the volume of impact we're looking for to recycle film. And so that we've been working on with these 3 cities and our stakeholders, including the Chicago area. And I anticipate over the next few months, you'll start seeing some of the announcements and some of the work we're going to start doing to test out some ideas about how to have this impact we want to have to bring more film back into reuse. So thanks for the time to talk today, and I look forward to the questions at the end.
All right, thank you so much, Mark. We're getting some really good questions in the chat. Don't forget to pop those in there for us, and we'll sort through them and ask those upon the completion of John Wilson's presentation. And John is the Director of Sustainability for Amcor Flexibles North America. He is based in Neenah, Wisconsin. In this role, he oversees development and execution of Amcor's sustainability strategy across the pillars of product innovation, collaborative engagement, and sharing of expertise to educate and empower consumers. John has worked in the packaging industry for 19 years in a variety of roles, and he believes packaging sustainability is a critical differentiator for Amcor's CPG customers and the consumers they serve. His work focuses on setting and meeting ambitious targets for recyclability of plastic packaging, incorporation of recycled content into that packaging to create a circular economy, and reducing the environmental impact of Amcor's manufacturing operations where the packaging is produced. John?
Thank you, Mike, and thank you to the Illinois Recycling Foundation and Flexible Packaging Association for allowing us this opportunity. Yeah, you can go ahead and click through to the next slide where I'll introduce Amcor. So we are a converter, as Mark just described. That means we buy the plastic pellets and then we convert that into packaging through extruding it into films or rigids, printing on it, laminating, slitting, pouching, whatever the case may be, and creating the packaging that our customers, which you see a representative sample of on the right, trust us to produce for them. So the main categories of packaging we produce are flexible plastic, paper, and aluminum packaging. That's where my attention is focused. We also do rigid packaging, folding cartons, and capsules. Next slide, please. So I think I'll offer a similar but slightly different perspective from some of the other speakers coming from a different place in the value chain. But I wanted to start by talking about just the important function that packaging provides. Jordan referenced it in her talk earlier, talking about healthcare and food packaging. Other speakers have mentioned it as well. But packaging serves a critical function of protecting consumers and protecting the product that is contained within it. And importantly, working to reduce the environmental impact of food products by reducing food waste. I don't have the data in this presentation, but I have some talking points here I can use. One is that according to Ameripin, which is an advocacy organization for the packaging industry, getting food to the table in the US accounts for 10% of the total United States energy budget and 80% of freshwater consumption in the US. And yet 40% of food that we buy in the or produce in the United States goes to landfill and gets wasted. So if you can extend the shelf life through packaging, that has a net benefit that is much bigger than just the footprint of the packaging. And so we use this image you see on the slide here to sort of illustrate that as you design packaging to be optimized, up to a certain point, you can improve the overall environmental footprint of the package and the product together. And the challenge is finding that low point in the curve, that optimal packaging point. And so I'll talk a little bit about how we use data and science to do that and try to reduce the overall packaging footprint and packaging and product footprint on the environment. Next slide. So Amcor is very proud that in 2018, we were the first packaging converter to sign the New Plastics Economy Commitment, part of the Ellen MacArthur Foundation pledge to design all of our packaging to be recyclable or reusable by 2025, to significantly increase our use of recycled content materials in the packaging, and then to work collaboratively with others like Mark and the Alliance and other groups to drive consistently greater worldwide recycling of packaging. So we see, our scale and the breadth of our operations as imparting on us a responsibility to lead the way on this. Next slide. So this audience probably knows this better than any other audience that I speak to, and it was also referenced by the speakers who went before me. So I don't need to spend much time on this, but today, the pathway for recycling of flexible plastic is through the store drop-off stream primarily, and through great programs like the Trex program to convert the films into other goods that keep them away from landfills. And I actually pasted a question into the chat for us to unpack after this. Hopefully with Albertsons and Trex, we can go into, and the other participants, go into some discussion of how do we increase consumer participation in this. But if you click to the next slide, ultimately, we see a future where film recycling is handled at the MRFs through curbside collection and sortation. And there was a pilot program called Materials Recovery for the Future that took place a couple years ago in Pennsylvania to explore what sort of investment in infrastructure would be, and what process changes would be needed in order to allow for the scalability of film recycling through MRFs. And that was really promising, right? We learned that it is possible. The investment is not huge, it's required. And we're working with organizations like MARC and the Alliance and the Recycling Partnership to collaborate across, the industry, across the value chain to invest in new technologies. MARC, I think, mentioned 50 plus projects that the Alliance has committed to funding. And one of the great benefits of this is that curbside collection starts to eliminate some of the restrictions that are there on film recycling today. And some of those restrictions, come from Trex's manufacturing process, but many of them come from the retailers who have the drop-off bins in the front of their stores, and quite frankly, don't want bad odors greeting a consumer as they enter the store. They certainly don't want to attract rodents to the front of their store by having food waste or other things collecting in those bins for days on end. And so there are a number of reasons why the clean and dry requirement is there today. And we see a future where that is mitigated as well. So, and obviously, having one less step for the consumer to take would increase consumer participation. So this is the pyramid of philosophy that we follow when it comes to designing films to be recyclable, right? The very thing that makes films really efficient as a packaging solution, they're very thin. The packaging weight per the ounce of packaged product is better with plastic flexibles than with any other substrate. But they are a problem with regards to pollution and waste in the environment because they become very hard to recycle or impossible to recycle in some cases, because we accomplish that by putting very thin layers of dissimilar materials together, each engineered to perform a very specific function. And then once they're put together, they can't be mechanically re-separated for recycling. So the philosophy we follow here, and this is fairly standard across the converting industry, is to first focus on what is recyclable in practice and at scale somewhere in the world. Even if you don't have the infrastructure in place right in your community right now or in the region in which you're operating, innovate in packaging and materials and processing technologies to allow for something that we know is recyclable. The next step on that pyramid is to is the actual recyclable, right? Not just designed to be, but now the infrastructure is in place in the region and where you're operating to collect, sort, and recycle consumer packaging. And at the top of the pyramid, is that the consumers understand it, they're aware of it, and they participate in it. And it really takes all three, I call it the legs of the stool to be successful here. If we work to design really recyclable packaging and we invest millions or billions of dollars in infrastructure and consumers are still confused and the product ends up being sent to landfill, all that work was for nothing. And so this is the philosophy we follow. And across the top, you see some organizations that help set standards, like the Association of Plastics Recyclers, that help set the guidance that we follow here. Next slide. And I think I'm getting close to the end here. Reinforcing something Mark said a few minutes ago, there are really two pathways to incorporate recycled content, and incorporating that recycled content back into the films plays a crucial role in creating circularity, in creating value for the materials that are being collected and recycled, creating an incentive for the people represented and the organizations represented on this call to make that investment to be able to do this. There must be value in the product that you're creating for this to be a pragmatic solution. So the two pathways are mechanical recycling. Completely agree with Mark. Should always be prioritized where possible, where you have mono material films that can be collected and recycled mechanically. You're going to end up with the best carbon footprint. You're going to end up with just the best environmental story that you have, that you can have. However, there's some challenges. Multi-materials are hard to, multi-material laminations, I should say, are hard to recycle mechanically. You often end up with contamination in the stream, often not food compliant. And so there are some limitations. Chemical recycling is a great solution, in my view, where mechanical recycling is not possible, and where you can leverage this newer technology to divert plastic waste from landfill and from being lost into the environment, create value with it, and keep it in the economy. So this is where the plastic waste is converted back into the base monomer or the feedstock for the polymerization process. This has less of a positive impact on the carbon footprint. And what I mean is it's better than virgin, but not as good as mechanical recycling. And that's because of the energy intensity involved in the process. But the output is a circular polymer with equivalent quality and safety to virgin resin. So this means you could put recycled content directly back into food contact applications or into healthcare applications, where it's extremely limited in our ability to do that today. So next slide. I'll end by saying that we like to inform every decision we make by using science and data. And to do that, we lean heavily on life cycle analyses or life cycle assessments to drive our decisions. We have a tool called the Amcor Sustainability Stewardship Evaluation Tool. We developed it in-house, but it's third-party certified by the Carbon Trust, so that our customers and the industry can trust the output of it. And it provides that information on comparisons between two different materials or two different formats to allow for science-based decision making on solutions. A great example I'll give here is that there are places where fiber-based solutions are an excellent alternative to plastic films where they're in place today. But there are also places where fiber is really, really challenged. And so it's important to take not only the considerations for the use and the distribution of the product and the packaging into account, but also what impact does the different substrate and the manufacturing process have on water usage or energy consumption and total carbon footprint, so that you can make informed decisions. If you're a brand owner, you can have some science on your side as you move forward. And the last slide, I think, just says that this is a daily way of life for us. We do about 1,500 LCAs a year. We've done 12,000 total since we built this and implemented this tool. And we see this as a important tool in the toolbox as we move towards removing plastic waste from the environment and improving the overall carbon footprint of our products and our customers' products. I think that's it. Oh yeah, I have a summary slide. Sorry, my apologies. Right. So to summarize, recycling is an essential part of the solution to solving the plastic waste problem. Obviously, this audience gets that better than any other. But we must design packaging to allow for that recycling. We also need to scale up capability and capacity for film recycling. And that's why we're very proud to work with partners like Mark and the Alliance to help advance those types of initiatives. That allows us to deliver solutions that offer circularity and a reduced carbon footprint or life cycle impact. And so we just, again, I've said this a couple of times, we see collaboration as critical in the sustainability space, and nobody can do this alone. So we have to work together across the value chain to accomplish it. I think that's actually the end of my presentation now. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, John. Thank you to all of our presenters. Now get your microphones on and be ready to handle some questions. Marta and Sue, perhaps you can help me organize these questions as well. We've had a number of them going back to the discussion with Trex and Albertsons about the collection of film plastic. Maybe we can start there. And I'm looking for the one from David, which was early on. Let's see, hold on. There was a question about whether some grocery stores have decided not to collect film plastics. Where do we stand with that? Obviously, Jewel Osco and Albertsons is interested in that. Do you know of stores and retail chains that have abandoned that effort, and whether they can be persuaded to renew their efforts?
Are you asking me?
I guess we would start with you, John.
And Mike, honestly, I can't comment on behalf of other grocers. I don't know what their basis of decision making is, so I really can't comment on it.
Oh, okay. And that was the question from David. I saw, I go to Jewel to bring my plastic bags. Another store chain has suspended their plastic film collection because they don't trust the recycling process. Are there any reports Albertsons can share with the public? And obviously you have nothing in that regard.
Well, I don't have a report. I can just say, yes, there are complications and sometimes issues with attempting to recycle, but we still think it's the right direction.
Right. And we had a number of questions about specific products, that whether specific products can be recycled. That, I think, is more of a Stephanie question there, because
I apologize. I'm here. I had a phone call I had to take. I am here now.
oh, no problem. No problem at all. I mean, we've had people asking about bread bags and sandwich bags and other plastic food wraps. And my question about that would be, are these things that are filtered out at the retail store level, the Jewel Osco level, or does that have to wait to go to Trex to be filtered out if they're improperly put into the containers?
I don't believe that there's any or maybe limited sorting that happens at the grocery store or distribution level. And Trex basically grades things when it comes in to grade it. It's 5% contamination. It's got 10% contamination out of 1,000-pound bale. And then from there, we determine the best use for it.
Here's an interesting question. Why is water an issue on the recyclability of bags?
So water can be very detrimental to our decking boards. So what happens when moisture gets into our process, it actually can cause bubbles or defects in the boards.
Okay. So, and what water content are we talking about? How much? What percentage?
I would say any. I mean,
Any, really?
I don't want to say any amount is okay, because it's not for us.
Yeah. Okay. There were other questions about the boards that you create, at Trex, I have one myself, which was about the wood content in there. Do you have are you allowed, or is it proprietary to tell us what percentage of the material is the wood that you retrieve?
The wood percentage is likely, it varies, but around 50 to 55%, and then plastic would make up the other portion. So
All right, and a question that
45
came
to
up,
50%.
yeah, and the other question I would ask is, is treated lumber a concern, chemically treated lumber a concern of yours as you're collecting it?
It doesn't come in through the streams that we purchase from.
Okay,
Because we're purchasing kiln dried wood that comes from hardwood flooring manufacturers. So we're not getting like C and D.
I got it.
It's very
Okay.
specific. It has to be hardwood and it has to be dried to a certain moisture percentage, because once moisture is an issue for us. So it has to, even our wood that comes in is dried
All right,
prior to us receiving it.
and then ultimately, there was a question that came in about at the end of the life cycle for your products, can they be recycled given that they are combined plastic and wood?
At this time, no, we don't have a recycling outlet for them. They would have to go to the landfill.
Okay, and the lifespan, I've gone to your website, I saw a number 30 years, something like that. Is that the ballpark?
Yeah, so I believe we have a 25-year warranty on the majority of our boards. So whatever the warranty period is, of course, we expect our decking to last that long. I would venture to say that once you add plastic and wood together, it's going to last longer than that.
Okay. I want to get to John's question that John Wilson, you posed and referred to it when you were doing your presentation about how we get folks to buy in on the film recycling issue. I mean, I'll take any thoughts on that. Do you want to restate that at all, John?
Yeah, I haven't seen specific numbers that have been published anytime recently, but my understanding is that, to be frank, consumer participation in the store drop-off program is relatively low. And what I mean by that is the films that could be collected in those bins, of those films, some very small percentage actually make it into the bins. And so certainly I think Trex would like to see more make it in there, I assume.
Yes, we would.
The stores, I assume there's some revenue associated with selling the material to Trex on behalf of the retailers. They'd like to see it. And collectively, on behalf of the environment, we'd all like to see much greater consumer participation in recycling across all different materials and formats that get recycled. So curious if anybody on the call, but specifically I was posing the question to Stephanie and to John about if you have any ideas or if you've explored any to increase consumer awareness or consumer participation in the program.
So I would say that Trex's school and community programs are our education outreach. So each one of those, you got to think you have one person that signs up, but they are reaching out to maybe 25 people or maybe 100 people or maybe 300 people. We don't know. I would say that would be kind of the outreach that we have. As you know, education on recycling is very difficult at best. You usually have limited staff that is trying to get out a very big message, and any education is good education for us, is what I would say.
I'll make a comment that we have these discussions all the time. How do we do more recycling? And there's often a trade-off between the quality and the quantity. The quality that comes through a retail take back is good. There's no significant contamination, you haven't purposely mixed it with all the other glass and metal and plastics that get recycled. So it's really useful for recycling. But how many people participate in that system, and how do we get more volume in it? So whatever we can do to get more volume through a retail store take back is a great idea. And I know, the people on this call, I'm sure we all do that because we're eager beavers on this. But there's so much more out there that we need to figure out how to come in, get into the system. And that's the challenge we face every day, is quantity, quality, trade-off discussion.
And Jordan just brought up a part of the issue here is how we define things. You want to address that, Jordan? I was just looking at your comment about recycling versus upcycling and downcycling.
Yeah, sure. So, we keep using the word recycling here, but we're defining it in different ways. So the way that I define recycling is like the traditional form of recycling with glass, for example. A glass bottle can become another glass bottle, that becomes another glass bottle indefinitely. But when we talk about downcycling and upcycling, that usually means that a feedstock or post-consumer product is becoming one more product. So it gets recycled once, and then that new product is permanent and it remains. So the issue with, I think that Trex is a business model that is important when it comes to upcycling or downcycling essential plastics. But all of the non-essential plastics that are just creating more and more of this lumber that is now a permanent fixture and it's exposed to the elements. There's sun beating down on it. It's being weathered every day, every year, and that's shedding chemicals and PFAS and microplastics into the environment. We just have to be conscious of that it's actually not recycling. It's upcycling or downcycling, and that's recycling once.
Mark, I'm wondering if you would be willing to address that, since you're looking at the circular approach here.
Sure. Yeah, I think let me go back and use a bit of a paper example. 20 years ago or whenever we started paper recycling, there were types of things, magazines, glossy things you couldn't put into the recycling system. And, the rules were confusing. And the technology and the business models have evolved to virtually all kinds of paper can get in the system and gets used to whatever level we do today. And I think plastics will end up going in that direction in terms of taking plastic and bringing it back into another single-use application. But it's not going to be for everything, and there's going to be opportunities in all sorts of technologies that are an alternative to landfilling, right? But they replace other materials, so they have value. If it's plastic lumber, it's replacing lumber largely. And there's a comment in the chat about the treatment of that wood today. So would I prefer a plastic lumber on my deck versus a treated lumber? It's a good question. Nothing is perfect. The science needs to come out to play on this, for instance. I'm not sure there's a lot of science that there's PFAS in plastic lumber that's leaching to the environment. I don't know, but that seems strange to me. But yeah, whatever we can do, and that's the mission of the Alliance, is to be more circular, and that is a journey we are on, and it won't be the solution for all plastics, but it will be a solution for many plastics, and it is a journey. It will be an evolution from what we do today to much more circular recycling in the future.
We did have a question directly for Stephanie from one of our board members. As Trex boards break down, are they releasing microplastics? This is something Jordan alluded to. Are they releasing microplastics into the environment, especially if they get wet? Is the question. Stephanie, can you address it?
I'm not aware of any documents or information that supports or denies that, so I can't speak to it.
And we do have a endorsement here from Marta, who says, my mother has a home on the Atlantic Ocean with salt air hitting her Trex decking daily. And at 20 years, it looks as good as the day it was installed. So no more treated lumber for her. And as you mentioned, Mark, that's an issue. Treated lumber can be harmful. And the chemicals released by that. Yeah, I mean, as a gardener, as a person who talks to people about gardening, you're not to create your raised beds with treated lumber, because that can leach into the soil. So if we have an alternative, which is the Trex decking or something like that, we have to weigh the two and what we're unleashing by using either.
Yeah, I think, there's always going to be many cases trade-offs. So why do we have treated lumber? We have treated lumber because it lasts longer, and then you're not, I'll say, quote unquote, cutting down so many trees to replace your raised bed edging or whatever it may happen to be. How we compare and contrast, biodiversity, water use, whatever versus CO2, it's a very complicated story. But I think we can all probably agree that there's few perfect solutions. They all have their trade-offs, and trying to find the best one is a journey, and much more science can be brought to the discussion to help us understand which ones are better, because there's very little perfect out there.
There's a question from Joy that hasn't made it in yet. And it says, has there been any thought, and I think this would be Mark and John, has there been any thought creating a separate resin code for plant-based compostable plastics? I'm sorry, I'm scrolling it wrong here, but so they could be more easily discernible from other number 7s. So that, obviously you might be able to do it with an optical sorter, but again, it might be more discernible to creating a separate resin code for the average person to see.
Mark, you want to go first? You want me to?
Sure. Very quickly, I think it's an interesting idea.
Yeah.
The more specific we can be, the better. 20 codes is probably going to work, but it's an interesting idea I hadn't heard before. I don't know, John, if you've seen in industry any
I have a completely different take on it. I don't like resin identification codes. I don't think they serve a valuable function. I think we intended for them to inform consumers. But if I always joke, I do a training session here within our company several times a year, and I always use my mother as a proxy for like the average person, right? Because I bounce ideas off of her all the time, and she's a well-meaning, sustainability-minded average consumer. And if you show my mother the identification codes on the bottom of any given package, she has some vague idea of what they mean, but largely she thinks any of them mean that it's recyclable. She sees that as a recycling code, not a resin identification code. So I think it's fundamentally flawed in the target of educating consumers. So I think something really exciting that's been happening over the past several years is the How to Recycle program, which is a tile that it's an organization that's run by the Green Blue organization, which is also the parent company of the Sustainable Packaging Coalition. And How to Recycle is intended to inform consumer behavior rather than educate them about what different resins are. So it's a tile that says this plastic film can go in the store drop-off. This plastic film must go in the waste bin. This package, can go in your blue bin, your curbside collection stream. So the consumer sees it right there on their package. and they know exactly what to do with it, and they're not left confused going, oh, what is a 7? Is it compostable? Is it multi-layer, or is it a 2? You end up with a consumer that is very confident that they did the right thing in disposing of the product, whether that was sending it to landfill or sending it to a recycling stream. We're not asking the consumer to learn and then make decisions. We're informing them directly on the package of what to do. And so that's, I think, BPI certification, like labeling of compostable items, would fall into that category. And I think it's much better to inform consumers about what to do rather than, what it's made of.
Well, that's certainly been an issue for a long time. People in the industry have talked about this now, it seems like forever. So it certainly has to be simplified. And I think part of the problem is there are so many different kinds of plastics that the recycling symbol has virtually lost any meaning. And so I think that might be a better way to go, John. I wanted to get back to Jordan. You were talking in your presentation and showing us the numbers from Chicago. And the one that leapt out at me was the increase from 2021 to 2022 in the revenue that came in for plastic bags. Do you have any idea why that happened?
Yeah, I was really surprised at that too, because in 2017, 18, 19, 20, the revenue was pretty stable around 5.5 million to 6.5 million a year in those first 4 years. And then in 2021, there was a big jump in December, up to 1.4 million that year. So it started climbing to a little under 7.5 million in 2021. And then in 2022, it was just like off the charts. But there were months like March, August, and December where the revenue was like, 3 to 4, 5 more times higher than all the other months. Like, for example, in August of 2022, it was $6.4 million in revenue just that 1 month, which was more than the annual revenues from 2017 to 2020. So I have submitted so many FOIA questions on this revenue, and I haven't gotten a lot of answers back. So we're going to need some investigative journalism. But what I would speculate would be that this is reflective of the pandemic and the fact that the Chicago checkout bag tax was suspended going back to March or April of 2020. And it wasn't officially reinstated at any point that I can see. And that was just suspended for consumers. So the retailers still had to pay the tax. Over the pandemic, obviously, plastic bag usage skyrocketed because we couldn't use reusable bags. I actually snuck them through the self-checkout line, but very few people were doing that. So the stores were continuing to pay all this tax revenue on this increased bag usage. So naturally, we should see a spike. It's just been very delayed, and it's been coming in certain months. So I'm pretty sure it's pandemic related, but what I'm worried about is that this is going to be a trend that sticks, that it's not going to come back down, especially because a 7-cent tax is not nearly enough to trigger loss aversion to really matter to people. So what I'm afraid that we're going to see now is people just absorbing it and paying it. A 5-cent bottle tax in 1972 would be equivalent to 36 cents today. So we need to raise the tax to something that is meaningful, like 20 cents. to get people's attention again and trigger that loss aversion so that they will start using reusable bags to avoid it.
Well, I know you're not a psychologist, but part of
I like
this.
to think I am.
Okay, well then good. Maybe
I've been to enough therapy that I kind of have a master's, like by default.
would you look at the results of this and say that behavior was affected at all by the imposition of the tax in Chicago?
Well, like I said, going into the tax, so pre-tax, we didn't have any data. You know, it was just kind of like these bags were showing up, people were using them. Nobody was keeping track of how many bags people were using. So based on national data of a per capita usage of 500 bags per year, this is a 88% decrease from that. So to go from 500 bags per person to 59, which this data reflects, that would be an 88% decrease in usage. It's still an inordinate amount of bags, 309 bags every minute, as opposed to 2,568, assuming we were using 500 bags per person before the tax. So I would say it absolutely has affected behavior. But going through a billion bags over 6 years is still clearly a problem.
And I'm looking here, Marty, you had a good question here. Is there a way for industry to work with retailers that stop collecting plastic bags? Corporate policies, at least for 2 locations she's familiar with, indicate that the chain engages in recycling, but store managers cite issues with bailing the bags and misuse by customers as reasons they stop. Can any of our presenters address that at all?
I'll take a stab at one piece of that. That's a big question. There's a lot to unpack. But I think the very end of the question around misuse by consumers, that's part of the design for recyclability piece that I spoke about in my portion, which is I think consumers are still confused. They see the bins and they think, well, any film can go in there, but it's not, right? Trex certainly does not want just any film. They want polyethylene films that are approved and compatible, with their manufacturing process. And so, as a converter at our place in the value chain, what we're doing is, rapidly transitioning to films, away from films that are less recyclable and to films that are more recyclable. So that's just one piece of the chain. I think, I can't speak to retail or corporate policies, or the operational issues with bailing the bags, but I think when it comes to consumer misuse, that's one of the major issues that can be addressed, and we're working on it.
Anyone else?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I have a question for Stephanie. You said that you have these 500-pound bales of plastic. What does 500 pounds of bags look like?
They're 1,000-pound bales.
Okay.
So that a 1,000-pound bale of plastic is going to be the size of a pallet and 4 feet tall. So it's like a 4 by 4 by 4 foot brick.
And then there was a question about other stores that take the bags besides Albertsons.
Yep. And I can tell you, we have a list completely on our website of all the stores in the country, and it's broken down by state. And let me pull it up here. There you go. That's a 1,000-pound bale right there.
Okay.
Illinois, we have Food for Less, Fresh Time, Hy-Vee, Jewel Osco, Kohl's, Mariano's Fresh Market, Meijer, Piggly Wiggly, Roundies, Ruler Foods, Save-A-Lot, and Schnucks.
And there was another question, I don't know if it was addressed. Are stickers a problem when they're on bags or on the film?
They are not a problem, no.
Okay.
Oh, that's good to know.
Yeah.
Oh, and there was another question. Does Trex accept plastics from candy wrappers like
No.
Swedish Sour Patch Kids, etc.? That. So that's
They're a mix of polypropylene and PE, and the amount of polypropylene is an issue.
Yeah, so this is one of the areas where we are working, and Stephanie and I sit on a couple of work streams together, and the industry is working to address exactly that issue, right? That's what I was speaking about, taking those mixed material laminations and converting them to monomaterial solutions that can be mechanically recycled. So those are the types of applications that we work on to innovate in the materials. And then we work with Stephanie and Trex and through the How to Recycle program to get them approved for a label to go into the store drop-off bin.
well, that raises a larger question about those kinds of materials that cannot be recycled. Why are they there? Why can the industry find a way to consolidate some of this, the materials and bring them all closer to something that can be recycled? Or is it just the Wild West out there, and anytime somebody comes up with a material that they think is the perfect one for their candy bar, they're going to put it out there regardless of the consequences?
Yeah, so one of the great things that's going on right now is organizations creating some guidance for brand owners and for converters and for all of us to align on as like a North Star. So one of those is the Consumer Goods Forum published what are called golden design rules. I don't know, a year and a half ago or so. And we were very involved in helping set those golden design rules. And so within that, there's a rule related to flexible packaging, and it's very, very specifically guiding the designers to use materials, to not use other materials. It says prioritize monopolyolefin solutions, avoid using foils, polyesters, PVC and PVDC, which are detrimental to the recycling process. Just generally providing guidance that we can build future developments onto or based on. Why do they exist? To answer the question, it's decades of development of different materials that are just really, really efficient at what they do. So a great example is a material that's commonly used as the outside layer in a multi-layer lamination is oriented PET, or just oriented polyester. It's really, really thin. It's really stiff. It's really glossy. It's really clear. It's a great ink carrier. It protects the graphics of a package. It's cheap. It just has a lot of things going for it that make it really efficient and functional as a packaging film. However, once it's laminated to the polyethylene sealant layer, which is a very standard sort of flexible packaging combination, now they can't be reseparated, as I mentioned, for recycling. So
how do we bring in end of life considerations to these manufacturers?
Exactly. That's what we're doing with the golden design rules. The Consumer Goods Forum golden design rules are a great example of moving towards standards that allow for much better life cycle impacts.
I'll just build a bit on John's comment. There's always a journey here, and 20, 30 years ago, people were trying to better preserve food, including candies and things like that. So you think of your chip bag and the foil-like lining you see in your chip bag. And that bag is made up of many layers that try and prevent the oils from going out, because nobody wants an oily bag, prevent the moisture and the air to getting in, which would spoil the product. But the different variations of that packaging has reduced over time as companies coalesce on the better product to provide that functionality. And in that journey more recently, the focus has now been on how do I deliver that functionality, but make that end of life solution better. And that's where we're where we're going as an industry, is to make that packaging still keep your food fresh, but how do you do that it'll be easier to recycle? And it is a journey, and there's a lot of good progress going on, and you'll see probably more progress in Europe with perhaps regulated standards to do that. But this is not a long-term solution. This is something we'll see in the next few years that may address well over half of the packaging today that's difficult to recycle. I think we will see solutions that make it much more easy to recycle some of this packaging.
It can't come soon enough. We had a request. Natalie, I'm glad you're still here, because you've been having a conversation in the chat here about compostable issues. And Natalie, if you're welcome to turn on your mic and ask a question if you want. And she, first of all, wanted John to repeat the standard that he mentioned earlier. But Natalie, if you're interested, do you want to address the issue of compostable products?
Yeah, definitely. So I work for LRS, and what I've heard from several composters is that compostable plastics are considered a contaminant for them because they don't have the infrastructure for recycling that type of, or composting rather, that type of material. And there's also within Illinois permits that also apply to having that kind of capability. I'm not an expert on it, but that has been the feedback that I've heard, which I think is important to get out there so people understand that if it says compostable on it, and if it's plastics, it doesn't mean that it can actually be composted by your local facilities that do end up receiving it. And then I do have another question that anybody can answer regarding introducing plastic film into the curbside collection. Like my initial thought is, doesn't that then promote the idea that plastic is okay because it's quote unquote recyclable, as opposed to being banned from the curbside collection? Because of course, as a sustainability person, like we want to collect everything, divert as much as we can from the landfill, but how does that change the perception if we're now promoting it to be included in your curbside bin? Like, doesn't that just promote using the plastics that we want people to stop using?
Well, I'll take the first stab at responding. I think there is a very appropriate place for plastics, as I mentioned, you know, protecting products, protecting consumers, carrying food and healthcare products, so that you know, we keep people healthy and safe and well, you know, fed. So I don't say that I wouldn't say that we should ever completely eliminate plastics. They're quite efficient at what they do, which I just mentioned, and can be circular and kept in the economy and out of the environment. That's the goal. Recognizing that they are a contaminant for the MRFs today, right? They get wrapped around the equipment, they contaminate the fiber stream, they reduce the value in the fiber stream, which is critical for the MRFs. And that's what the work in Pennsylvania that I referred to was designed to uncover, was whether it's possible to eliminate those challenges through infrastructure and equipment investments to allow for recycling of films at the MRFs.
Yes, let me touch on that, John, as example. The Alliance is involved in that work, as you highlighted. It's work that's been going on for a good 8 years, but there are those communities where they're asked to put the film into the recycle bin. It goes to the MRF. It is separated today, and largely today goes into a durables type, plastic lumber type kind of end use. The next phase of the project that we're working on is how do we bring more technology to bear at the MRF to create the quality of product that then can go back into additional packaging. And that's the goal of the next phase of that piece of work. But today it is a successful program, at least getting the film out of the landfill in that particular location.
Hey, thanks for the clarification,
Could-
Mark.
Do you mind if I take a stab at the question as well, simply because that is part of our mission of the Illinois Recycling Foundation is waste reduction, reuse, recycling, composting. It's all in there. Just because a product is recyclable doesn't mean you shouldn't reduce your use of it. And it certainly invites you to reuse it. So it's constant behavioral change and education for the consumer that you're looking at. But certainly because something is recyclable, it doesn't mean you should use more of it. You should, be practicing good behaviors all the way around. So, water going into a water treatment plant goes back into the river, right? But we should use less water. So just in general, trying to people will use these products. Some of the people I know who have done their absolute best to reduce plastic film, which is specifically what we're talking about in this webinar today. They've done their level best to shop, to not use any plastic film, still tell me that they end up with plastic film. It is wrapping our materials and it is protecting those materials in shipping. It's protecting those materials. We're going to continue to see it. So that's the thing. And making sure we have an infrastructure that can take it back, I think is paramount. So just throwing that out there, guys.
Well, and something that you and I talked about before, Marta, is the idea of curbside film plastic pickup could actually confuse people. It could hurt the recycling effort, the film recycling effort for a while if folks think, well, so-and-so, this municipality is doing a curbside. That means I can throw it into my single stream bin behind my house, and that's going to cause all kinds of problems. So education is what's important, as we all know, those of us who have tried to promote recycling and reuse. It's so hard to, as we said with the recycling symbols, to get people to understand that they're not the go-ahead to throw this in your recycling bin necessarily. So there's all kinds of pitfalls here. I also want to bring up that John Wilson put the Consumer Goods Forum Golden Design Rules. He put a link up there in the chat if you want to see that. And he says, see rule number 6, increasing recycling value in flexible consumer packaging. So for those of you who are interested in that, you might want to click on that. I do believe the chat is available in the recording. Is that right, Marta?
Yes. Yeah, we
okay.
try to save everything. And I do want to point out that we're getting close to 12 o'clock.
Yep.
So if we have any last questions.
I want to answer one quick question, Jordan, that got asked of you, why the bag tax was suspended, that whole situation, and how difficult it is to keep track of that.
Why was the bag tax suspended? Because of the pandemic, because
Right.
of all the concern of that COVID. Do you guys remember wiping off your groceries? So it is back. It's reinstated. I did just want to add, this is my reusable bag. I have used this hundreds of times. It has bike grease on it. It's pretty old, but I wash it, and I don't use plastic bags anymore at all. However, to Marta's comment, I have a huge bag of plastic film that unavoidably came into my household. So there is space for both. We have to reduce our usage of these non-essential plastics, and the essential plastics that we use, we need to find other options for those.
Can I ask a question? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Mhm.
Okay, why hasn't the city reinstated the plastic bag tax?
They have. It's reinstated. But it was never, it was suspended for consumers. The stores always had to pay it, which explains why the revenue for 2022 was $15 million. Stores had to keep paying the tax on all those bags that were used. but consumers didn't have to start paying it again until it's kind of nebulous, but like somewhere in 2021, they started charging consumers again. So most stores do charge consumers now. There is a loophole in the law, though, that says they don't have to. So if they don't want to pass it on to their consumers, they can just pay the whole 5 cents to the city and not charge 7 to consumers.
And who knows whether that is an effective way to go. All right, we need to wrap up here. Marta, why don't you do the final presentation here?
Well, there was a little slide about our upcoming webinars. We're going to try and talk legislation next month. We're going to try to talk about recycling professionals education. In April for Earth Month. We're hoping to do composting in May, and in June, we're going to be in Bloomington Normal for our conference. So if you weren't here at the beginning and heard all that, please visit illinoisrecycles.org and learn a little bit more about becoming a member. And hopefully we will see you in person at our conference in June.
All right, and we want to thank everyone who's part of this. Thank you so much for being here and taking your valuable time and spending it with us, and especially to all of our speakers. Thank you, and our sponsor.
Yes.
Which I don't have right.
Flexible Packaging Association.
Thank you. That's what I meant to say. Okay, thanks. Everybody have a wonderful day and week, and we hope to see you soon.
Thanks so much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.